Thank you so much, Sophie, for joining us today. So we have Sophie Krantz from based in Melbourne, Australia. She's a global strategist, and I personally have known Sophie for, I think, over 4 years. We've known each other. We've met virtually. We've worked together virtually as well, but we never met in person. So I think that's also part of our conversation today, and I think it will be nice to see where the future of work is going. We're having expanded worldview, and what are the changes that we are seeing in organizations as well. So, Sophie, I'd like you to please share with us an introduction about yourself first, please.
Hi, Sahar. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Having spent, I think it must be a couple hundred hours with you in this virtual setting. It's always delightful when we do come together to meet. It feels like I know you well, and wonderful to be here with you today. So I guess the official title is Global Strategist, but at the heart of it, I'm an explorer. I quite like sailing, I quite like climbing mountains, but really what I love is to get out into the world and understand what's working in the world. And of course, you and I met as fellow coaches in the Exponential Organisation Framework, and we've indeed done a lot of work together with companies around the world in that space. And what that taught me was how to spot what is working in the world. There is a framework. There's a lot that is working. And yeah, it can be big tech, but it's also in this world where we have a lot of course, mass digital connectivity. We have a lot of people that have new opportunity. We've got ordinary people achieving extraordinary things. And really that's at the heart of what I do and love.
I love that. Thank you. And what got you into this space? I know that you've worked for the UN. I know that you've had work in the private sector. I think like many of us working in this place, but for those that are listening to you, what got you into space?
Yes, like many people, I think there's 1 million people a year that apply for a job in the UN. And I was that child growing up in Australia and wanted to make a positive impact in the world, and the dream was to work in the UN. And when I was in my 20s, I was very fortunate to secure a position in international economic development, and it really was the dream job. It really was, sitting in a room in different parts of the world with people from around the world, exploring ways to improve the socioeconomic situation in a country. And that was in my work, it was with trade and investment strategies. And I remember on my first day walking in the Palais des Nations in Geneva, that beautiful, impressive building with the flag-lined entrance. I remember feeling so excited and so almost overwhelmed at having this opportunity to move the needle in the world. And it really felt so hugely important. And then fast forward a few years, and the moment when I decided to leave the UN was standing in the diplomats line in Kampala airport with my UN passport. And there was just diplomat after diplomat after diplomat flying in from different UN agencies doing stuff. And I didn't know what anyone else was doing. And my heart sank, and there'd been a lot of discussions with people that I was working with from on the ground about impact and what they needed. And I just realized that I wasn't going to move the needle in the way that I wanted to. And so I decided to go back to the private sector, and that was going to work in Zurich at Swiss Re, now the world's largest reinsurer, building advisory networks in countries like India, Brazil, Colombia, and other key emerging markets, and also looking at capacity building in governments in low and middle-income countries. And I felt like a little bit like I was moving the needle there. Let's sort of close the financial services gap. But still there was something in me that was like, what else? I really want to have the agency to be able to work anywhere in the world, and being a part of the EXO community and being a practitioner in that framework really opened up a world of possibility in terms of being able to work on projects within the formal EXO world, and also as part of informal collaborations or independently, and really being able to look at organizations of different sizes. Where are they? Where do they want to be? And how can we get them there, deploying this framework? And things like just building a community that cares, things like how do you solve a problem that is indeed in more than one place? How can you solve and scale? And just doing some quite simple things to achieve step change in organizations, big companies, small companies, and so on, that care to do that work, being commercially smart, being commercially successful, moving away from the need for grants, funding, and so on, to be more independent so that they can make that impact as well.
100%. And both of you, me and you, you're based in Australia all the way, and I'm based in Bahrain. That's about 15 hours flight, just to give a perspective. And we've worked on many initiatives together. We've delivered workshops together. I remember being at 3 a.m. at my time. And it's been amazing, because we've worked with a global community, and still people ask me if this is real, if this is actually a real job, or if this is actually something that exists. But I think one of the topics that you talk a lot about is expanding the worldview. So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah. Well, let me say, first of all, Sahar, I recall you dialing in to workshops, to coach teams at 3 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning. And I recall saying to people in that workshop, because of course you were dialing in at that hour, and then we had other people from around the world dialing in at other very late in the day hours, 11 p.m. in the Netherlands, different, or not, no, that geography is wrong. That would have been
US, I remember.
Yeah. That's right. But I remember saying, it is true that there is nowhere else in the world this room of coaches, this virtual room of coaches, want to be than here with you. And I think when we sort of explore this concept of expanding your worldview, and just to pick up on your point, it is possible. It is possible to come together in a virtual room, a Zoom room or a Teams room or a Google Meet room with people from around the world. They're willing to get out of bed at any time to come together to do work that matters. And when we expand our worldview, we untap a world of possibility, a universe, in fact, of possibility. When we know what's possible, then it creates new pathways to do different things. And so for you and me, it's been indeed knowing that we can be a part of a community that is invited to do this really amazing work. And then sort of more broadly, I think there's a couple of quotes that I'll mention that relate to a worldview. And the first one's from Stephen Covey. And he says, "We see the world not as it is, but as we are, or as we are conditioned to see it." And I do believe that so many leaders, emerging leaders, established leaders, we see the world as being really quite confrontational at the moment. It's a challenging time in business, and geopolitically, it's certainly a very challenging time. Economically, there's so many challenges that we're confronted with. And I don't know about you, Sahar, but I find that a lot of leaders, a lot of people in business and also in other organizations, they tend to contract. When times are tough, kind of contract and control what you know. And yet there's also this other quote that I'm very much inspired by Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, who says, "When you change the way you see the world, you change the world you see." And so when we see that there is greater possibility, when we see ordinary people achieving extraordinary things, we open up this possibility.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that's what you said about, in times of challenges, we see many individuals, companies, leaders feeling that they're more on the lax side, let's say, feeling that there's less opportunities. There are, it's just a world of danger, versus when we look at the opportunities that we have. And me and you, we've both worked together during COVID. Actually, I've seen the opportunities to be more, to solve problems and to solve problems globally, no matter where you are. And that's actually possible. And so for people to believe that, a lot of times it takes, some examples and some, for them to really start believing of, what is it that's possible to do with given technologies, given the globalization and all of that, and to look at opportunities rather than the challenges that we are facing. And so with that, I would like to talk about also, the future of work, given that we also work in that space as well. What is the future of work? And given that also in content creation, for example, now I know that you write a lot of articles. I also write articles, and with creating this content for Women for Impact as well, I do realize that the challenges of technologies such as generative AI that are going to be taking over content creation. I personally feel like, again, there are more opportunities than challenges, but what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I agree, Saha. I think that the opportunities are, excuse me, to explore spaces where generative AI won't go looking. So we know that AI is built on what has been discovered, explored, written about, published in the past. And so many problems persist. And what I love about having almost the world at your fingertips just by having a smartphone, and there's almost 5.55 billion active internet users in the world today. What I love about having the internet and the world at your fingertips is you can learn about the world. And so while AI is not perfect, for people who are curious, who wonder about, I wonder what business opportunities there are in another part of the world, I wonder what innovation is thriving in another part of the world, you can start to pick up some like some breadcrumbs. You're not going to kind of get the whole loaf of bread in one hit, but you can start to pick up some breadcrumbs and then explore. And that might pique some curiosity to then say, well, on LinkedIn, I'm going to connect with this entrepreneur in India because I'd love to learn more about it. And I believe everyone loves to talk about the thing that they're most passionate about. And of course, we're here doing that today. Mm-hmm. And so what I love about AI is the opportunity to ask questions and then to go on a world tour, go explore. I mean, it could even be in your own backyard. It doesn't have to be out so far. And yet the world is so fascinating. The world is so interesting. And the problems are so big. And even just wondering the problem that affects my community here, it could be the equality gap that we face here. Where is that? How does that represent itself? How does that present itself around the world? What does that look like? Who's working on it? And just a series of questions and prompts, of course, using generative AI to do that can really start to paint a picture. And I think when you see the bigger picture, you can play a bigger game. And so what I love is this idea of people being either explorers or investigators, and then write about it, then write about what you've shared and your unique perspective, your take on it, your recommendations for leaders, your advice for budding entrepreneurs, your advice to policymakers who might not have the full picture. That might matter to someone somewhere. And as Kevin Kelly wrote in 2008, there's real value in having 1,000 true fans. Just because, of course, everyone can have a blog, everyone can be actively producing content personally or with the help of AI. There's so much content that is indeed being produced. And I say, go hard on what you really believe in and connect with a fraction of the global population and explore what possibility that opens up. And what I love about 1,000, or it could be 100,000 true fans, people that you connect with, it doesn't have to be where you live. Because I know that there's a lot of people in the world who live somewhere who might not feel that they aspire to be like the leaders in the businesses they see in their country, their city. They might not want to be like the leaders in their community. And you can find people that connect with you, who connect with what you care about, by putting it out there And of course, Sahar, a lot of the work that we've done together, a key element of it has been experimentation.
Yes.
And so to explore and to experiment is to say, well, for the next 90 or 180 days, I'm going to write about this topic every week and have some metrics around what does success look like? Is it gathering 100? In the first 60 days, is it 100 fans? And then at 180 days, is it 1,000 fans? And how can you experiment using technology, using generative AI to help you broadcast your message? But what is it that you care about? And I really think that needs to come from that sort of intersection of someone's heart and mind.
Absolutely. I think there are some amazing things that we just said. And I think that there's so many examples that we have seen as well through the work that we've done is that we no longer have to create anything by ourselves. I don't have to invent something very challenging or very difficult or even take the time to do that. As you said, I can connect with a startup in India, for example, that's solving a problem, but it's finding what problem I want to solve is the most important step of the way. And then finding, as you said, that community and also the different skill sets and, bringing all of that together, and you can solve really, really, really big problems and really good problems that if you solve them, you'll be creating a better life for the people and for the planet. And I think one of the objectives of these conversations is really to bring the awareness of that profit and purpose can go together. And it doesn't mean that if you're in business that you just think about, maximizing shareholder value. We're seeing a shift towards maximizing stakeholder value as well. Is there anything from, the work that you've done or anything that you have noticed in the industries that you've worked in, the effect of collaboration and co-creation? What has that what kind of results are we able to see?
Yeah, I have a favorite example, if you like, that goes back a couple of years ago. So I'll briefly start there and get to the collaboration point. So in 2019, here in Melbourne, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade sponsored 23 women-led businesses, women owners, 23 women from South Asia and Afghanistan to come to Australia for 2 weeks. They spent 1 week in Melbourne, and I was doing some work with the Export Council Australia at the time, and I hosted them. And there were some amazing women doing extraordinary work, growing their businesses. And there were two women from India. One was growing a global business, not making any sales in India. She was using beautiful artisan designs to make baby carriers and export them around the world to women, predominantly in the West, who use baby carriers because baby carriers aren't used in all countries. So very, very smart operator. And then there was another lady there from India, Rubina N, and she employs thousands of women who can work in their home, rather, because that's the only place they can work. And the earrings that I'm wearing today, she gave to me in 2019 in Melbourne, and these are made by a Muslim woman. So she employs thousands of Muslim women in their homes so that they can have economic opportunity, they can have a job. And from the pandemic, in a lot of instances, because of lockdown, of course, the pandemic was very, very challenging in India. These women were the sole breadwinner, income earner in their families. And what SAFA, the organisation and headed by the founder and CEO, Rubina N, is doing, she's moving them to become more digitally literate so that they are able to have micro enterprises that are moving essentially up a value chain to not only make something with their hands, but to also sell on a marketplace. And what was so fascinating at the time was, and fascinating, and let me also add frustrating, was the talk about the intermediary, the buyer, the Western buyer who would come to India, the buyer from Europe or North America, these very large superstores, I won't name them, but we all know them. And they would see these beautiful handmade earrings as a commodity, and they would treat the price point as if they were made by a machine in any low manufacturing cost manufacturing part of the world. And so we spent a lot of time exploring what's the value of connectivity to what you do. And I wonder how many millions of people around the world would love to have earrings just like this. Muslim women, other women, the story of who has made this product and the economic opportunity. And we know that when women earn money, they invest in their family, they invest in their community, and there are very positive ripple effects. And that story continues as they continue to evolve and provide economic opportunity in the home. That is a case of profit. The companies that make profit acting as an intermediary and putting controls, if you like, on how that organization can operate. But the courage of the CEO to say, no, this is not right. So they do operate in a non-profit framework where they do a lot of fundraising, but they're absolutely looking at allowing these women to have greater earning capacity and to positively impact their families, their communities, and so on. And so that's at a very micro level. But of course, there are thousands of women, so it's significant. And what we see in other organizations, of course, is when they look at a broad level, what's the traditional business model? How would we normally do this? And when we say, well, what's the problem? What's the problem that we can solve? And how do we do this in a way that is not extractive, that doesn't exploit people and so on? And so how some of the work we've done together, particularly in Asia, where cultures and societies, and indeed we see it in the leaders, where they have a very collectivist versus an individualistic view. And if we look at Hofstede's cultural dimensions, we do have cultures around the world that are very collectivist. And in Asia, we often see this. And they don't want to just go hard on profit. If it means we're going to build this, we're going to innovate our fishing business, for example. But if that means putting fishermen or people who fish out of business, that is not okay. We have to have a way of making sure that they are looked after, whether it be retraining or whatever it is. Because, of course, these leaders also, there's a different perspective on how we view the world. And there's a beautiful book that talks about this, the geography of thought. And again, people in different parts of the world, including Asia, they look at the world holistically, and they also have a much further time horizon. And so a leader who's in their 40s does not want to, in 10, 15 years' time, be told that essentially their reputation is damaged by causing great harm to people and the planet. And that thinking that is prevalent certainly I see it in Asia, in parts of Asia, and I don't see it in Australia, where, for example, we have had Rio Tinto, one of our largest companies, blew up Indigenous caves because it got in the way of their mining activities. And so the way we operate in the world is very different, but I love that we have very clear and compelling case studies of that global perspective and that long-term horizon.
Amazing. I love how you connected the two stories together, the one of the entrepreneurs from India, and then, go towards the work that we have done in Asia, and also towards the global companies as well. And I can see that, when we talk about, for example, upskilling and reskilling individuals, and connecting that with the future of work, the example you gave in the female entrepreneurs that are creating those beautiful earrings, I feel like we although in many developed countries, we are seeing, obviously the way to work when you have kids, for example, they have to finish their school education, go to university, and then find a really good job because, if you as a parent can afford a really great university, you're giving them a better opportunity in life. But that doesn't really, for me, one of my favorite topics is, how can we ensure that we're given equal opportunities, in the world, especially when it comes to developing and emerging markets. And when you talk about those earrings, I'm thinking about, all of these women they became breadwinners, which is not the usual thing in their culture. And also the other thing is that when we're upskilling them with digital skills, as you said, that means that they have better job opportunities. First of all, no matter their educational background, no matter their age, no matter their background or where they live, as long as they have access to technology, that means that they probably will have a better quality of life. And this is what we can see, and they can earn an income as well doing that. So I love all the stories that you've mentioned and how they connected together. Thank you so much, Sophie.
Thank you, Sahar.
And before we end this, is there any key message that you would like to share with anyone that's listening, to the companies, individuals, any kind of message that you would like to share?
Touching on the main points that we've covered, Sahar, what really pops for me is that the world can feel so complex and challenging, and yet there really is so much opportunity. And Steve Blank, of course, the quite famous innovator, entrepreneur, said, get out of the building. Because, of course, when we're in our own buildings, this is not where the greatest ideas come from. This is not where we innovate and create the future product, service, or business model. And in getting out in the building, it can indeed be just by asking AI initially a few simple questions. It can be building your connections on LinkedIn. Are there blind spots? Are there biases in your world? Are your connections predominantly from where you're from? Do they have the same sort of worldview? And so a challenge as we start thinking towards 2025, and we're only 5 years away from 2030, where the UN Sustainable Development Goals are likely to be missed. It's on each of us as leaders to build our world through our connections. Who do we know? How do we work? Let's experiment. And what can we create in the world? And co-creating, coming together with people who have a shared vision and shared purpose is so valuable. And Sahar, I'm so grateful to have had the chance to know you for 4 years, because we have collaborated, co-created, and we haven't needed to meet in person. And that's the world we live in. And so I really hope that people embrace the essence of that and all that opens up.
Thank you so much, Sophie. And I hope that very soon we'll meet in person as well.